Just shake it. Just shake it. Just raise it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our panel, How DAOs Make the Algorand Ecosystem More Fair and Functional. It's great to see you all in Miami and to see people in general. Here on the panel with me are, so we've got Michael Cotton, who's in Australia.
Hello, Michael.
Beaming in.
Everyone, hi from Australia, everyone.
And yes, he's the founder of Meld Ventures. We've got Arul Murugan, who's sitting next to me, chairman and founding managing partner at Borderless Capital. And then on my far left is Jonas Lamis.
Yep.
CEO at StakerDAO. So to kick off the discussion, why don't we start with you, Arul? Your fund is investing in projects in Algorand, and actually this morning you announced a new $500 million ecosystem fund. So can you give us an overview of DAOs in the Algorand ecosystem, and also tell us what it is that you plan to do with your new fund?
Definitely. First, good afternoon to everyone. And so we at Borderless Capital, we are very focused on investing into Algorand ecosystem. So far, we have invested in about 120 companies, and we are doubling down, and we are so glad that we just announced about the $500 million fund too. So we would be investing across. And as we are investing and evolving, we see a lot more DAOs that we are investing in. And so far, we have invested in more than 20 DAO. And a lot of companies that we have invested are also in the process of transitioning into DAO. So we look at, I think, DAO is the future. And when we talk about DAO, I cannot start without mentioning about Algorand Foundation. Algorand Foundation itself is a DAO. And actually, it's the largest DAO in terms of the number of governors that we have. So you all know that we had a on-chain voting a few weeks back. More than 50,000 governors have participated. So by far in history, that is the largest. And so we're starting with the kind of the largest DAO from the Algorand Foundation. And the property of the algo goes into every other DAOs that are natively built on Algorand. So that's kind of a very broad overview in terms of the DAOs. And we are seeing the DAOs in the DeFi, NFT space, gaming, and also into the infrastructure. So at this point of time, we invested into all areas. And we will get some of the details into the specific areas.
And Jonas, your venture has already begun operating as a DAO. Can you tell us a little bit about what StakerDAO does and what it's been like so far operating as a DAO?
You bet. So thank you, Laura, and thanks for having me here, Algorand team. So starting kind of at the highest level, what is a DAO? Explain it to me like I'm 5. Probably a lot of the audience has heard the term, but it hasn't really gone deep into it, especially since they're so new on Algorand. I like to think of a DAO as a community on Discord with a shared bank account. Now that's kind of maybe a little pejorative there, but in essence what we're doing with DAOs is we're rallying communities of like-minded people together, and we're giving them infrastructure where they can pool funds and pool decision-making through tokenized governance that allows them to essentially invest those funds in things that can return value back to their community, right? And so we've taken that model to heart at StakerDAO, and StakerDAO is a community of crypto enthusiasts who are making investment decisions to build products across a variety of layer 1 proof of stake chains. We're called StakerDAO because we really believe in the staking ecosystem in general, and we're trying to find a way to connect some of the top layer 1 chains in a way that value can flow between them for the mutual benefit of all involved. What that means to StakerDAO is that our community has a treasury, and they've invested that treasury in building bridges between certain chains. We recently built a bridge between Ethereum and Algorand, We've also built a bridge between Ethereum and Tezos, and we have a new project coming from the community between Ethereum and Polkadot in Q1. So we're really interested in connecting those layer ones together, the proof of stake chains together, so that interoperability can happen, if you will. And let me just say one more point on Algorand. We've built this bridge, and then we've built an asset that we've launched on Algorand, and that asset is called Wrapped Algo. And the Wrapped Algo asset has a very simple concept. We love, again, going back to the staker concept, we love proof of stake algorithms because they allow you to, stake your assets and earn yield by providing security for the chain itself. And obviously that's a dramatic improvement over proof of work, and we all know for many different ways. And so with the concept of wrapping that layer one token, wrapping that algo, it allows you to continue to provide the security that staking provides to the network. It allows you to continue to get the yield that you get from being staked into the network, but it also gives you a tradable token, one for one, that you can use in DeFi. And so that's what we're doing with our wrapped assets.
I liked your comments. They were interesting. There were some fighting words in there. I don't know if there are any other crypto people here who are tribal believers in their own chain. But anyway, okay, so Michael, you're in a state of transition to a DAO. Why don't you tell us what that process is like going from centralized to decentralized? And I'm just kind of curious what the additional hurdles are to becoming a fully fledged DAO.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think firstly, like for us, the first step is taking what is that sort of baby leap, which is to start doing on-chain governance through token voting. I think for me and for the project ourselves, we really want to see that go to the next level, because I think in reality, voting based on tokens is not the dream scenario for where we need DAOs to end up. In reality, we need to see further innovation. And I think if we sort of boil that down, what that really looks like is if we look at who are the leaders and the people we trust as leaders immediately around us, whether that be friends, whether that be mentors, whether that be people in significant positions around us, how do we get the elders of our community? How do we get the wise people of our community? How do we bring those kind of attributes on chain? And how do we allow for that on chain in a decentralized way? So I think the experiments at the moment, so much of it has been based on this basic form of token voting, which is what we'll be doing for a V1. But what we're really keen to see is how that iterates over time, and how we go from the simplistic version of token voting, which, as we know, you can buy tokens, you can really, as a whale, you can actually adjust votes by bringing a lot of value on chain and actually taking control of certain votes. So how do we transition from a system where we're seeing voting taking place around dollar-associated assets, and how do we see it around who are the true leaders and who is bringing true value to these different protocols? I think what we will see is there are some interesting projects that are looking at how you have reputation, how you have credibility on chain, how do you actually allow for those kind of elements. I think we'll see a lot more development in that side. I think we're seeing projects like Pollinize is a really great example, where they're working on ways to on-chain allow people to actually innovate and almost measure their capabilities or their attributes or their ability to lead in certain areas. And that is where you can bring some of that elements of understanding who someone is, having a reputation, knowing you can trust them to do certain elements, and actually bring that into a DeFi scenario. I think we'll also see the ability of things like metaverses allowing this kind of iteration to take place faster. I think the experiments can happen at far more speed inside these kind of environments. But, the aim again is really to transition from where it's all about, dollar associated assets and those controlling DAOs to how do we change it to genuine community leaders and to those who are actually going to contribute a lot of value to the projects they're governing.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of open up discussion on that, because I feel like every time I talk with different crypto people, and it can be really anything, but obviously DAO voting is a really, obvious example. like even when you are saying, oh, 50,000 wallets participated in voting on Algorand, what does that mean? Like how many people is that actually? Is it 10,000 people who are using 5 different wallets, all, trying to just kind of use all their wallets to vote, or what is that? So what do you think are the kind of more promising new developments in terms of reputation and identity being built in Algorand or in general anywhere in crypto?
I think the reputation identity we are in the process of building it, and I think it's across the chain. So the first step we look at is having more number of people coming and voting. For example, if we have more than 50,000 wallets, even if we take like 1/3 of them, so that's still a fairly large number. And I think as the identity solution is getting built, then I think we would have a much better. So we are in the process of evolving in the governance process.
It's a really interesting problem, and we've complicated it at StakerDAO by having governance on multiple chains, right? So when we first launched last year, we started on Ethereum, and we had a governance token on Ethereum, and then we empowered the token holders with a treasury so they could decide what they wanted to spend money on how they wanted to branch out from there. And they voted to build a bridge to Tezos. And so we built this bridge, and we started launching some projects on Tezos, and then we launched governance on Tezos. And so now you have people holding our tokens on Tezos and on Ethereum, and they're both voting for how to spend the treasury. And then they voted to that combined entity of those votes said, let's expand to Algorand. And so they then voted to fund a bridge that has recently been launched, and that the wrapped algo token that has been launched, and now they're going to vote to extend governance to Algorand soon. I think it is both a risk associated with few people holding many wallets, like we're talking about, could be a challenge, but also there's this promise of trying to pull divisive opinions from different chains and put them together into one decision-making process, which has so far worked pretty cool for us. I love Michael's vision of governance in the metaverse. I think that's going to happen pretty soon. Perhaps it starts on Ethereum, where there are already a number of metaverses in place, open public metaverses. But the fact that you can gather wallets to a certain location in a metaverse, and those wallets have to represent themselves with little avatars, and you may or may not be able to tell if the avatars are real people or if they're just bots at that point in time. But if you rally the crowd there to make decisions, I think that's going to be a really cool natural evolution of all this.
But yeah, Michael, did you want to add anything? Because I don't feel like I've heard any kind of really solid proposal for what a identity solution might look like.
Yeah, look, I think the easy solution is everyone gets identified, but I think it's not really the solution we want. I think at the core of that, especially if you talk about a KYC scenario, there's still huge portions of the world who can't KYC. So I think that's an immediate sort of element that is like the obvious solution for identifying individuals. I think what we still don't see there, though, is we don't see the ability to measure whether they should actually be leaders and what value their contribution should be measured in. I think what we've probably seen so far is like how this is done in a simplistic form on areas like Ethereum is you see commitments. Look, again, I don't think this is a perfect solution, but I think so much of this is the experiment is what's going to lead us to the final solution. But what we're seeing on Ethereum is people actually locking up tokens for periods of time and actually committing to governance, very much the same as what we're seeing now with Algorand governance. So the ability to actually commit, the ability to say, look, I'm here, I'm not about the movement of prices, I'm not about, day trading and the volatility. I'm here as an actual contributor to the ecosystem. And that's one really simple way we've seen that measured. I think we've also seen councils replace full decentralized token voting. So synthetics is a great example on Ethereum, where the council actually makes a lot of the major decisions, but the council is voted in, but they have the opportunity to make their case. I think what we probably will see is a need to do this kind of establishing a value from community members will need to be done at speed, because the obvious measure is time. If you can spend a year with someone on a Reddit forum in the metaverse, chatting on Telegram, you can actually make up your opinion on whether you think this person is valuable and someone you would trust and someone you would allow to lead you in certain areas. Whereas doing that at speed is the key. And again, I think it's going to be projects like Colonize and some of these other interesting projects that kind of do this incubation accelerator, almost personality/IQ test on chain, that might start to see how we'll get a result here, where the ability to actually go through a process and be verified or have that sort of credential element attributed to yourself or your digital identity could be where we actually land as a potential solution. But again, I think we haven't even really solved governance in the real world. I think in thousands of years, I still don't think the system is perfect. So, we have a real challenge in terms of then taking that into a decentralized space and solving that issue. But I think we're all up for it, which is great.
I think since identity is a key one, right? Let me address it in a different way. What is the key challenge we have? The key challenge I look at is the legal and the regulatory aspects. Still, there's a lot more questions on DAOs. Hey, these are going to be the new LLCs. The new Web3 is all going to be built by DAO, not by the regular company, centralized authority. So as we're addressing this regulatory and the legal aspects, I think the identity solution is going to be coming in. So the way as an investor I look at here is that when there's a challenge, we will have entrepreneurs identifying the solution. So right now, I think there are different things that we are experimenting. And so I think in the next 1 to 2 years, what I look at here is that identity is one of the key area where it's part of the infrastructure building. People will be addressing them. So that's the one way I kind of look at to see that how we will be addressing them.
And I just wanted to add, Laura, that I do think there are many really interesting experiments running in DAOs for governance these days. One that I would just share, there's a project called Nouns DAO, right? And it's a model which is essentially building a hedge fund, if you will, based on the purchase of a high-value NFT. And Nouns DAO has this smart contract model that is issuing one NFT per day, and it's this cute little kind of 16-bit crypto-punky kind of architecture of a design. But that one noun goes up for auction every day, and then people bid on how much they want to spend on it. And each noun these days are going for like $150,000 to $200,000 worth of crypto. And the winner of the noun gets the NFT. The NFT is their voting token into the DAO. And all of the funds that they spent on getting that NFT go into the DAO treasury. So you have kind of this shared risk and responsibility. Not everybody put the exact same amount into that treasury. Some people early might have only spent $30K to get their noun, and other people are spending $200K. But you have while doing it fully anonymously, you still have this really strong element of one noun, one vote, if you will. Now you could buy two nouns, you could buy them in different wallets, but it's still a major commitment that you're making to the community to be a part of it.
Yeah, I love that example. I think that's a really fun one and probably indicates something about the future of where things are going, and definitely NFTs and DAOs are getting mashed up in really interesting ways. One thread I wanted to pull on was that Ethereum has come up in this conversation a lot, and obviously DAOs are Algorand does have a very active DAO. And I just wondered, in general, I think this is a question that a lot of other layer ones are kind of dealing with if they're in the same space as Ethereum. How does Algorand kind of like try to differentiate itself? Or, does it like take a different niche than Ethereum? Or do they just both, go after the same applications? What's your view on that?
Again, with the community that's building StakerDAO, they're excited about many different layer ones. I think the reason why we selected Algorand as a major investment for our DAO is because the technology is like rock solid. And the transaction fees are low, the governance is decentralized, and the investment from the external community is high. And also, I would add that both the foundation and the Inc. are executing at very high level, which is not necessarily the same at some other layer one blockchains. And so, as a result of that, I think that's one reason why we really have gone all in on it.
So the foundation for the DAO is the decentralization. And the way I look at why a lot of entrepreneurs are coming to Algorand is one of the most decentralized chain. The fact that how the governance is done with so many voters, that itself gives a good example. So that's why I would say, like, I think people are seeing in the future, in the longer term, they believe that Algorand is very well positioned. And at this point of time, the way I look at it is that DeFi is been there for a while. So definitely Ethereum, we have seen many good DAOs on the DeFi that are started. So now we are seeing amazing DAOs getting created in Algorand, which I have not seen them in Ethereum or others. So let me give one or two examples. I don't want to get into specific because we have not closed some of the deals. So one example I would say is cultural heritage. So I have seen few entrepreneurs coming in and looking at to see that, you know what, there are crafts that has been done in the developing countries, and it may take $1 for that, but the same craft in a developed country is a luxury. People are paying $100. So how do I use the DAO model to bring them up? There's a tangible and intangible value into that. So similarly, we are seeing different use cases. And so if you look at, I think, maybe 3 out of 5 DAOs that we are seeing are coming in the NFT space. And NFT is everything other than money, every goods and services. So people are getting extremely creative. And people are using the decentralization model that it has. And I think the Algorand Foundation itself setting a strong example puts it very clear for a lot of entrepreneurs to come and build it here.
I think, Laura, if I can add in as well, I think the benefit of what we've seen in Ethereum is they have been conducting endless experiments around DAOs. And the beauty for building an Algorand is we get to take all those learnings. We get to look at everything that's been done. We get to look at the mistakes. We get to look at the things that worked incredibly well. And we get to take all the pieces we think fit together really nicely and deliver that in our own version. If you layer that on top of the fact that Algorand technology is so incredible in terms of the capability of what can then be done on chain, that's when you really start to get really interesting, because, you get this huge leap forward in terms of the experiments that have already taken place. And then you apply that into all of this high quality tech that you have with Algorand. I think that makes for a really interesting mixture. I think if you also, in terms of why we built on Algorand, which I think is actually quite relevant to this, I think for me, for a long time, looking at a lot of different blockchains, the thinking was there was potentially going to be the need to rebuild at some point. This may not be the foundation that is actually the lifelong solution for blockchain tech. And that is quite a daunting thought. I think Algorand was really, the brilliance of Algorand was this felt like this was a base where we could make a home here, we could build a product here, we could actually be here forever and actually work on this technology forever as a future-proofed blockchain technology. I think the brilliance of DAOs for that as well is you have the same element that applies. You can build out incredible technology, put a huge amount of effort and research into creating incredible products, and know you're in a safe position and a future-proof position in terms of where your home is and the technology you're going to be utilizing.
One other thing I wanted to ask about is something that kind of goes to this voting issue and maybe a little bit around the identity stuff we discussed. Obviously, I'm sure people know that Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil, I think his last name is pronounced, have done a lot of work on things like quadratic voting in order to kind of reduce the influence that whales can have in voting. And, I don't feel like I'm seeing a lot of that in action. And I was kind of curious if that's something that people are working on, or, what you think the potential is to kind of bring more democratic style of voting to DAOs?
I don't think we've resolved at StakerDAO that there's an issue yet. I don't think that we've come to the conclusion that one person, one vote is necessarily inherently the best way to govern this kind of architecture that we're building here. I'm not saying that it is, and I'm not saying that it isn't, but in the corporate world, we have shareholders who vote by proxy for the board of directors, and the more shares you hold, the bigger the vote you get, right? And are we saying that that's bad, and instead every Tesla shareholder should get one vote for how that company moves forward? I think that's one of the biggest questions. We need to challenge the assumption that it has to be one vote per person is the best way.
Yeah, well, quadratic voting is even a little bit different. It's like it gives more weighting to any votes that received votes from a greater number of entities. So it's like not exactly one person, one vote. It's like slightly different.
No, I think we cannot correlate to the physical world. In the physical world, one person, one vote. But here we have a digital wallet. One person can create multiple digital wallet. I think we're still figuring it out how to solve some of the problems. So for me, I look at to see that let's have the basics, make that work, and then as we evolve, a lot of these problems could be solved. So rather than debating like, hey, how we can have a perfect world, so because there are many challenges that we have in the digital world, so I think we will figure it out, I would say that.
Yeah, and a lot of the voting that we're doing for our governance model is yes or no, right? Here's a proposal someone has put together, the community's put together, they put it on chain. Do we want to invest this money or not invest that money? That doesn't give you a wide, like our system is basic enough in that sense. It doesn't give you 16 choices where a quadratic model might even make a lot more sense. So, the best we have right now in the anonymous architecture that crypto provides is token based.
You talked about quadratic models. I've seen few chains adopting that, but I've not gone that far. So I think we could talk about various options, but I think we're still in the very early phases actually.
And look, I think, sorry, Laura. I think I really agree with Jonas and Arul that I think in reality, we also do need to keep it simple at the moment. And I also think that it's not on projects to do these experiments as such. I think it really needs to be done by DAO infrastructure projects that can really actually battle test these kind of concepts on what the difference looks like. I think for me, I'd love to see a transition from the shareholder voting model, which is really the token model now, which is the same model we're also implementing, but for the same reason that we're saying it's the requirement to be simple and easy at the moment because we haven't got a perfect solution. But I think it'll be great to see the experiments take place of how we go from shareholders being controllers to shareholders being more like the recipients of the value created from the vehicle, and the right people are actually governing, because I think the biggest issue there is you still have that financial influence over control. And I think that's where it'd be great to move away from that where we can. But in reality, at the moment, simple is the way to go. And I think it's a system that works for the minute. And hopefully we'll see some really interesting improvements on that over time.
All right, so we have a hot minute and a half. We're going to do a really quick lightning round. Why don't you each go around and just say which DAO you're most excited about, or what kind of area of DAOs you're most excited about?
Both of our portfolio companies, I think, first I would say we are excited what both the entrepreneurs are building. And actually, Michael is both an entrepreneur and an investor, and he started in Australia. What I'm excited about is there are many DAOs that are coming up in Australia. I don't know what is it. So maybe like 2 out of 5 are coming out of Australia. So maybe we'll have Michael talk about the secret.
We're drinking the DAO Kool-Aid over here, Arul, I think.
Yeah, I'm involved in a ton of DAOs. StakerDAO is awesome. I love the NFT DAOs that are springing up these days. I'm a co-founder of one called SquiggleDAO. That's my personal favorite. It's all about the Chromie Squiggle, which is a NFT token that was released on the Artblocks platform. And we have about a $30 million treasury of squiggles that we've acquired that we use to govern our DAO decisions.
Okay.
Look,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Laura. For me, there's actually a really interesting team working on DAO infrastructure for Algorand, which I think is really exciting. I think they're going to push some boundaries in terms of what's technically possible. I think on top of that, I am really excited about that, the idea of credentials or the idea of credibility on chain. I think that's going to be a really interesting experiment. I'm excited to see what comes out there.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all to our panelists and also to all you attendees. It's been super fun.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Take it out, just shake it.